Thanks everyone for being here early, but you have a very good reason to be here early. As Mike said, it's a special treat to have John Kerry here, US Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, former Senator, former Secretary of State. And I appreciate, John Kerry, that you've also run from a White House meeting in order to be here at the end of your day. Mike mentioned one of the, I guess, relatively few positive surprises out of the Glasgow summit was the US-China joint Glasgow Declaration on Climate. Enormous symbolic significance. Clearly, there haven't been a lot of joint US-China anything for a while. But what practical difference, when we look at the words in that document, what practical difference are they going to make to the battle to contain climate change?
Well, Stephanie, thank you very much. A great question, and I look forward to answering it. But let me just first, if I may, say good morning to everybody, and thank you very much, Mike Bloomberg, who personifies global citizenship and activism at its best. And we're all deeply grateful to Mike for the leadership he has offered on the retirement of coal plants in the United States and efforts elsewhere. And I think everybody here knows that he's just been terrific in helping to galvanize people all around the world. So I'm very happy to be part of one of his important fora around the world. Stephanie, the China agreement is in fact, I think, significant. And I'm not saying that because I negotiated it with Xi Jinping, who is a longtime associate and friend. He and I know each other quite well over 20 plus years, and we've worked at this issue. The agreement is 5 pages that lay out our cooperative effort, not just on methane and CO2, but also on deforestation, and the creation of a working group between our two countries, which we are now immediately going to begin to activate. And it is that working group, with the help of experts who are going to come to the table, both from China and the United States and conceivably elsewhere, who will help hopefully to change the capacity for dissent or for debate with respect to the choices that we need to make. And I hope that our working together will increase the sharing of data, increase the sharing of options, and begin to engage us in a very important dialogue with the top leadership of both of our countries. And that's our hope. But importantly, the agreement is quite specific in addressing methane with a specific date for action. We agreed to work together in the effort to share information and to work on creating a national action plan. We have accepted the notion which President Biden put forward in Glasgow, together with President von der Leyen of the EU, of a methane pledge. And the pledge is that we will reduce methane by 30% on a global basis, which doesn't mean any individual country is doing the 30%, but in contributed global aggregation, we will get a 30% reduction on a global basis. And China agreed to work with us to lay out an ambitious, these are the words, ambitious national action plan, which China must submit and begin acting on by COP27, a year from now in Sharm el-Sheikh. The second thing that it did was set forth a rationale for the creation of the work group and the joint agreement, which is the acceleration of the reduction of emissions, with China agreeing that that could lead to specific targets, specific programs, specific policies, specific agreement on goals between us or for themselves. So if we were to do the 30% reduction of methane on a global basis by 2030, as Fatih Birol of the IEA has made clear to us, that is the equivalent of taking all the cars of the world, all the trucks of the world, all the ships of the world, all the planes of the world to zero emissions by 2030. So you can get a sense of the enormity of what the reduction of methane can mean. It's about a 0.2 degree reduction in the rise of the Earth's temperature. And it's the single biggest, fastest grab that we can make for dealing with this problem. The third thing that the agreement does is sets a date currently for when China, in the commencement of its 15th five-year plan at 2026, begins to phase down the consumption of coal, and does so with an agreement with us that together we will work to make best efforts to accelerate the reduction, the phase out of coal. So there are three big sort of components of this, but paragraph 6 of the second page of the document lays out this goal of accelerating and an acceptance of the idea that our working together does result in the accelerating of the reduction of CO2 as well as methane. So look, all of what we do in Glasgow or did in Glasgow obviously results in words reduced to paper. But that is what brought us to Glasgow. That is what resulted in the submission of 191 national determined contributions, or NDCs, the reduction of emissions. It's the words translated into actions that actually resulted in our committing to additional funds, a doubling of the amount of money that goes into adaptation, a significant recognition of the challenge of loss and damages, with a beginning of a dialogue that will take place over the next year to figure out how we deal with that. It has very ambitious increase of ambition among particularly 65% of global GDP. And that 65% of global GDP is now committed to real reductions over the next 10 years, not a 2050 net zero target, but a target between the 2020 and 2030 will see a 50 to 52% reduction of emissions in the United States, 55% in Europe, 68% in the UK, 45 to 50% in Japan and Canada and South Korea. So we, in addition to that, secured major commitments from India with a 450 gigawatt deployment of renewables, Saudi Arabia, 50% deployment of renewables in the next 10 years, Africa, South Africa, committing not only to a 1.5 degree track, but to begin to phase out coal with the help of the developed world. Likewise for Indonesia, which raised its reduction levels to 50% in all, 25% from the forests, and from stopping deforestation and increasing the sink, and also about a 25% reduction in coal-fired emissions. So things are happening, and the bottom line is we're all going to have to work overtime. The collaboration demand of the world in order to achieve our goals could not be higher or more important, and that's why these kinds of conferences are themselves so critical to us now.
You mentioned the sums for adaptation and mitigation for the developing countries. That was one aspect of this agreement that certainly fell short, and for many who were there through all of the negotiations, left a kind of bitter taste in their mouths, because it felt that it seemed to many that very little progress had been made in really offering developing countries a path to develop as well as be part of this climate action. Do you understand those who felt disappointed by what came out of it, the lack of actual money on the loss and damage, and the failure to even meet the $100 billion target, which you've admitted is nothing in the scheme of things of what's going to be needed?
Well, look, let me be more, Stephanie, I'm glad you asked the question, because I really want to tackle that. You know, the $100 billion was a goal. It's become a target, but it was a goal. It was pulled out of the air by Gordon Brown, I think in Copenhagen, where they were trying to find agreement, and they decided to be 100 billion. We accepted that in Paris when we negotiated it. But as I said, it was the goal of 100 billion. And the way the money is counted is frankly not very efficient, because there's a lot of money we can mobilize and have mobilized, but it doesn't get counted towards what we're doing. When I took this job on, we were at 67 billion for the year 2022, excuse me. And that's the first year the Biden administration could step up, folks. A guy named Donald Trump cut all the funding, and a guy named Donald Trump pulled out of the agreement. And so when Joe Biden became president, the first budget he has in front of him is the budget we're working on right now. And we put 11.4 billion into that, doubling the already doubling that Joe Biden had engaged in, even as we're trying to get our own country back on track and do the things we need to do to get the job done. We've accepted a 50% to 52% reduction. We are legitimately on track to keep 1.5 degrees alive. And I personally wish that more energy was spent focusing on some of the countries that didn't submit NDCs, and big countries, and focusing on the countries that are not on a 1.5 track, but indeed are going to be, putting more emissions into the atmosphere over the course of the next number of years. So the reality is we got up to 95 to 97 billion according to the OECD for next year. And if we can complete the budget that we have coming in, then we'll be over the 100 billion for next year. In addition, we are definitely, according to the OECD, over 100 billion for the year after that, and for the year after that. So we are making good in the first year that we have an opportunity to do something with the budget. In addition, loss and damage has not even been accepted as a major part of the agreement, but we accepted the idea that it is important to deal with, and that we do have to have a dialogue how we begin to deal with this. But look, if we don't want to shut the entire United States Congress down on putting money into climate, we can't accept the opening of the liability, which is going to tie up the courts and the structure and not get the money we need for adaptation and resilience. So we really ought to be putting more effort into adaptation and resilience, where we are doubling the money. In fact, President Biden quadrupled the amount of money that we're putting in, and we willingly accepted the idea of going from 20 billion to 40 billion out of the 100 billion that will be there for next year. But the bigger issue, folks, is not $100 billion. That's peanuts compared to what we have to be doing here. And the fact is that we went to the top banks in the United States. I personally engaged with Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, Citi, JP Morgan, Bank of America. And those 6 banks have committed that over the next 10 years, they're prepared and will invest $4.16 trillion in this transition. In addition, Larry Fink at BlackRock says he's going to put at least $1 trillion in, and others will. And there's a global finance alliance, which Mark Carney has been working with, which has tens of trillions allegedly of additional money. But Stephanie, we have to find a way to deploy that money. That money is not giveaway, it's not concessionary, it's ready to invest. So countries bear a responsibility to also step up and make sure that they have the transparency and the contracting and the PPAs and the ability to be able to make those trillions into deployable investment, bankable money. In addition, we have to work with philanthropy. I talked to the Rockefeller Foundation last night. They're working with Jeff Bezos and with Mike Bloomberg and others who are putting in money in philanthropic structure that will then leverage tens of billions of more money that we can use to help de-risk, to help have blended finance. So there's going to need to be a really strong collaborative effort here between the world of high finance and the world of government decision-making that can actually deploy money so that we can build out the renewable energy base, transition out of coal, do the things we need to do on technology. 50% of the emissions we need to reduce in the next 10 years is going to come, I am told by scientists, from technologies that are not yet at scale. So everybody's going to have to be part of this race to zero. And really what Glasgow did, I thought, was rather brilliantly bring people together and begin fire the shot that begins the race of this decade. And we now have to report new NDCs next year if people are not up to par. We got the rule book for the marketplace rules locked down. We have the elimination of double counting. We have transparency rules defined. So I think a lot was done in Glasgow, thankfully, that actually makes real this next decade of action and decision making. And I hope everybody is going to bear down and help us deploy those trillions, because that is what it's going to take in order to win this fight.
But you know as well as I do that a lot of the money that's needed is needed in developing countries, and there's no commitment from those big financial institutions to take the money to where it's going to be really needed, and in no capacity necessarily, given that these investments would need de-risking. We discussed it in the session yesterday. But can I just ask, if you were Prime Minister Modi, we had a rather probably what you would consider a minimum commitment from India at the COP. But if you were Prime Minister of India, would you have said anything different? Have you been given any reason by the rest of the world to be more ambitious in your domestic target when you're also looking at a need to develop?
Let me tell you what we're doing. I understand Prime Minister Modi. I've met with him several times this year. We formed a partnership to help India be able to deploy its 450 gigawatts of renewable power. And we've agreed to bring finance and technology to the table. We will need India's governmental help to be able to make sure that the land is available, either lease or sale, that the transmission lines can move across one state to another. The discoms in India are going to have to reform, because not all the revenue is collected for the electricity that is provided. And obviously, this is a two-way street to some degree. But in addition to that, yeah, we have foreign assistance programs. We have the Development Finance Corporation, which will have several billions of dollars that it is already currently financing projects in less developed countries around the world. But the real fight here, folks, we're going to be real about this. We have been a leading nation in consistently assisting other countries to develop. And in fact, whether it's AIDS in Africa and the PEPFAR program, which we did in a bipartisan way with George W. Bush and the U.S. Senate back when I was in the Senate, we've always reached out. We're giving away vaccines now to the degree that we can. $1.5 billion, I think, are going out. So we are involved in helping less developed countries, and we will stay involved in doing that. But please focus on this. 20 countries equal 80% of all the emissions. They're basically your G20, though not exclusively. Those 20 countries bear the greatest responsibility for helping to solve this crisis right now. And the fact is that no country really accepted, ours included, that this was a genuine crisis until 1988, 1992, when we all went to Rio and formed the process by which we now meet every year for 26 years. But the truth is, a lot of countries decided to grow with coal, not with nuclear, not with gas, not with other alternatives. And coal is the primary culprit today in warming the planet and in polluting the air and in creating the intensity of the storms that comes with the increased moisture that rises from the oceans. And we have to start where the greatest amount of emissions are if we're going to win the battle. So if more than 50% of those 20 countries are now committed to a 1.5 degree track, and what we have to do is go to the countries where the greatest amount of emissions are and begin to reduce the greatest amount of emissions the fastest we can, as fast as we can. And that means China, Russia, India, Mexico, South Africa, Brazil, a group of countries, Indonesia. And those are the countries we've been doing climate diplomacy with. South Africa has accepted a new plan, but we have to, all of us, be able to put the deals together that will phase out their coal fast and provide the alternative renewable energy, and the other alternatives are going to be necessary to provide a holistic virtual grid that works for the future. We're going to get some of that done with gas as a transitional fuel, gas turbines that will hopefully supplant some of these coal-fired plants. But we don't want to look at gas with its methane content and its emissions unless we have abatement. If it's abated, fully abated, then have at it. But we've got to reduce unabated coal, unabated fuel. And there's enough of that out there to present a major challenge today. The truth is that India, I think, has the, if India were to deploy the 450 gigawatts of renewable energy, then India is in compliance with 1.5 degrees. So this can happen. It'll take all of us working together. We have formed a partnership with India, with Prime Minister Modi, in order to bring the technology and finance to the table, and we are prepared to work with India, with other countries, to help deploy as fast as possible. But all of us are going to have to be part of decision-making. We could do better with certain countries building out much more renewable energy. And many of those countries could build out the renewable energy and then rely on a gas turbine for the base load guarantees and energy security that they need. That is something that's doable. We have high hopes, some of us, for a small modular nuclear reactor. That is being pursued. There are interesting possibilities that are happening now already in that sphere. In addition to that, I just heard today about new technology coming from a certain group in the United States that may be able to use CO2 in the burn process and then in the capture. That actually makes it easier to capture the CO2 and then do something with it. So I think we're already pushing the technology curve. If Saudi Arabia can actually deploy that massive solar field and then use the solar to drive the electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen and then pipe it across the Mediterranean into Greece and into Italy, those are real possibilities now. So we're looking at a global economic transformation, revolution, if you will. And I think new technologies are going to come along that are going to change this game, hopefully overnight, but certainly over the course of the next 10 years.
We've run out of time, but I had one final question, because you talked about the importance of US leadership here, which is clear. Commitment to this agenda didn't used to be a partisan issue in the US, but it sure is now. If you looked at the polls, if you look at the recent election results in Virginia and elsewhere, you would say the Democrats are overwhelming underdogs for next year's election and, at this point, for the next presidential election. Why should the rest of the world believe this leadership is going to continue beyond the next 2 or 3 years in this crucial period?
For the very simple reason that the marketplace is going there, whether the government does or not. This is going to be a global revolution. And I believe that transformation is going to be so far. Look, General Motors and Ford Motor Company have already announced they're going to only produce electric cars by 2035. By 2030, they're going to have 50% of their cars are going to be produced, are electric. So I'm just telling you, you think they're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars retooling those plants for electric and then turn around because some politician comes in and wants to deny science again? No. What we're doing in the United States has nothing to do with politics and ideology. It has everything to do with mathematics and physics. And if you understand mathematics and physics and you believe the science, this is going to happen because it's going to happen in all the rest of the world. And the United States is not stepping up to say, hey, we're the leader here. Everybody's got to be leaders here. Everybody's got to step in together. But we are here to make up for the deficit of a guy who didn't understand science and didn't have any economic rationale and who pulled out of the Paris Agreement and hurt the world in doing that. And we don't have any time for that. So we're going to come back. We're going to do everything in our power because our citizens are as exposed as citizens everywhere else in the world. I just left the summit at the White House with President Lopez Obrador and Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau. And Prime Minister Trudeau talked about what's just happened in Vancouver. But what's happened in Vancouver is, you know, what's happening in Russia, where the infrastructure of their extractive economy is threatened because the permafrost is shifting, or the fires taking place in Siberia, or mudslides anywhere in the world, or fires anywhere in the world, or drought anywhere in the world. I mean, if leaders don't grab onto this baton, they're going to get thrown out because the public understands what's happening and they're demanding action from all of us. So I believe no politician in 2024 is going to step up. And besides, it's way too premature to be making any speculations about, I can't believe what's going on. President Biden is going to pass his next piece of legislation. And together with his infrastructure bill, that's going to put about $2 trillion plus, much of which is going to go to climate action in the United States. And even while Donald Trump pulled out of the agreement, the vast majority, 37 governors in the United States, Republican and Democrat alike, continued to stay in the Paris Agreement. Over 1,000 mayors continued to stay in the Paris Agreement. And they, you know, as I say, America stayed in that agreement, and fully 90% of the new energy being brought online around the world today is online because of renewables. This is happening without government. It's happening because the marketplace has made a decision that's where we have to go. And with disclosure and trading mechanisms and pricing of carbon and CBAM coming at us, believe me, folks, no one politician can undo what is about to happen.
Well, that's an emphatic note on which to begin our final day of deliberations. John Kerry, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be with you. Thank you so much.